The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Thames as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her camera lens for the 100th time. As the chief photographer for the Royal Parks Foundation, she had been tasked with capturing London's most beautiful locations for an upcoming royal visit. Queen Elizabeth and the Duchess of Cambridge would be touring the city's hidden gems, and Sarah's photographs would help plan their route. Sarah had grown up in a small flat above her grandmother's flower shop in Covent Garden. She remembered watching tourists snap pictures of the street performers and thinking how they always missed the real magic of London. They focused on Big Ben and Buckingham Palace, but never noticed the way morning light danced through the iron arches of Borough Market, or how the old brick walls of Neal's Yard bloomed with colorful murals that told stories of the neighborhood's history. Her phone buzzed with a message from James Wellington, the Royal Protocol Officer. "Sarah, we need the complete portfolio by Friday." The Queen specifically requested locations that showcase London's authentic character, not just the usual tourist spots. Sarah smiled, knowing she had chosen perfectly. Her first stop was Hampstead Heath, where ancient oak trees created natural cathedrals of green. She climbed to Parliament Hill just as the city below began to wake up. The skyline stretched endlessly, mixing old church spires with modern glass towers. She could see joggers on the paths below, dog walkers greeting each other like old friends, and families setting up picnics near the ponds. This was the London she wanted to show, a place where people lived, loved, and created memories every single day. Sarah captured a group of elderly men feeding ducks at the pond, their laughter echoing across the water. She photographed a young mother teaching her daughter to fly a kite, the red fabric dancing against the blue sky like a celebration of joy. These were the moments that made London beautiful, not just the buildings, but the people who brought them to life. Next, she traveled to Little Venice, where colorful narrowboats lined the canal like a floating rainbow. Mrs. Henderson, who had lived on her boat, Daisy Chain, for 30 years, invited Sarah aboard for tea. "You know, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, pouring steaming Earl Grey into delicate china cups, "tourists always rush past here thinking it's just houseboats. They don't realize each of these boats has a story, a family, a whole life inside." Sarah photographed Mrs. Henderson tending to her rooftop garden where tomatoes and herbs grew in recycled containers. She captured the reflection of the boats in the still water, creating a double image of beauty that seemed almost magical. A family of swans glided by, their cygnets following in perfect formation, adding grace to an already perfect scene. The afternoon took her to Columbia Road Flower Market, where the Sunday crowds had thinned, but the beauty remained. Tony Ricci, whose family had sold flowers there for 3 generations, was arranging the last bouquets of the day. His weathered hands moved with practiced skill, creating arrangements that looked like small pieces of art. "My grandfather started here in 1952, Tony told Sarah as she photographed him working. He used to say that flowers were London's way of showing hope. Even in the darkest days of winter, there were always flowers to remind people that spring would come again. Sarah captured the way the late sunlight filtered through the flower petals, creating a natural stained glass window of color and light. She photographed the Victorian terraced houses that lined the street, their colorful doors like gems set in old stone. Window boxes overflowed with trailing ivy and bright geraniums. Even the old brick walls seemed to glow with warmth and character, telling stories of all the families who had called this place home over the decades. As evening approached, Sarah made her way to the South Bank. With a London eye slowly turned against the darkening sky. But instead of photographing the famous landmarks, she focused on the street musicians, artists, and couples walking hand in hand along the river. She captured a group of children chasing bubbles blown by a street performer, their faces lit with pure delight. The Thames reflected the lights of the city like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Sarah knew that when the Queen and the Duchess of Cambridge saw these photographs, they would understand what made London truly beautiful. It wasn't just the grand palaces or famous monuments. It was the everyday magic created by millions of people who called this remarkable city home. Her camera bag heavy with the day's work, Sarah headed home through the winding streets of Covent Garden, already planning tomorrow's locations, and knowing she had captured something special. Tuesday morning found Sarah in Notting Hill, where pastel-colored houses lined the streets like a giant's jewelry box. She had arranged to meet with Elena Vasquez, a local artist who had been painting murals in the area for over 20 years. Elena's work transformed ordinary walls into windows to other worlds, and Sarah wanted to capture this hidden artistic side of London. People think Notting Hill is just about the famous carnival or expensive shops, Elena explained as she mixed paints on her palette. But look closer and you'll see the real community. She gestured toward a wall where she was painting a magnificent peacock, its tail feathers spreading across the brick surface in brilliant blues and greens. This peacock represents all the different cultures that make this neighborhood special. Each feather tells a different story. Sarah photographed Elena at work, her concentration intense as she brought the peacock to life with careful brushstrokes. Children from the local primary school had gathered to watch, their eyes wide with wonder. One little girl, Maria, had brought her own small paintbrush and was pretending to help. Elena smiled and let Maria add a small stroke of blue to one of the feathers, making the child beam with pride. The narrow streets led Sarah to Portobello Road Market, where antique dealers and vintage clothing sellers had set up their stalls. The market was a treasure hunter's paradise, filled with objects that carried pieces of London's history. She met Arthur Webb, an elderly man who had been selling vintage books here for 40 years. Every book tells two stories, Arthur said, handling a leather-bound volume with gentle care. The story written inside, and the story of everyone who owned it before. His stall was organized chaos, with books stacked in towers that seemed to defy gravity. Sarah photographed him reading to a small crowd of tourists, his voice bringing alive tales of old London adventures. Behind the market stalls, Sarah discovered a secret garden hidden between buildings. Local residents had transformed an empty lot into a community space filled with flowering plants, benches, and a small pond. Mrs. Patel, who organized the garden committee, showed Sarah around with obvious pride. "We all live in tiny flats with no gardens," Mrs. Patel explained, deadheading roses as she spoke. "So we created this space together. Every family contributed something, plants, tools, time, love." Sarah captured the way different generations worked together, grandparents teaching children how to plant seeds, while teenagers painted a new fence in bright colors. The afternoon sun guided Sarah to Greenwich, where the Royal Observatory sat majestically on the hill. But instead of focusing on the famous building, she explored the park surrounding it, where families picnicked on the grass and couples shared quiet moments overlooking the London skyline. She photographed a group of university students studying under the ancient trees, their textbooks spread out like colorful fans on the ground. At the base of the hill, the National Maritime Museum hosted a special exhibition about London's river history. Sarah met Captain retired Thomas Baker, who had spent his career navigating the Thames and now volunteered as a museum guide. His weathered face lit up as he spoke about the river that had shaped London's destiny. "The Thames isn't just water flowing through the city," Captain Baker explained, pointing to old maps and ship models. "It's London's lifeline, its highway, its heartbeat. Every bridge tells a story, every bend holds memories." Sarah photographed him with a group of school children, their faces fascinated as he showed them how to tie sailors' knots and read navigation charts. The golden hour led Sarah to Canary Wharf, where modern skyscrapers reached toward the clouds like glass and steel fingers. But even in this business district, she found unexpected beauty. In the shadow of the towering banks, she discovered a small park where office workers ate lunch and played chess. The contrast between old London plane trees and ultramodern architecture created a striking visual story. She photographed business people feeding pigeons on their lunch breaks, their serious suits contrasting with gentle smiles as birds perched on their shoulders. Food vendors from around the world had set up carts, creating an international food festival in the heart of London's financial district. The smells of curry, dim sum, and fresh crepes mixed together in a delicious celebration of the city's diversity. As the day ended, Sarah traveled to Brick Lane, where the evening brought the neighborhood to life. The famous curry houses were preparing for the dinner rush, and the air filled with the warm scents of cardamom, cinnamon, and fresh naan bread. She met Hassan Ahmed, whose family had run the same restaurant for 3 generations. Food brings people together, Hassan said, kneading dough for the evening's bread. In our restaurant, we've served everyone from taxi drivers to movie stars, and they all sit at the same tables, sharing the same delicious food. Sarah photographed the kitchen in action, where multiple generations of Hassan's family worked together with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. The street art in Brick Lane created an ever-changing outdoor gallery, with new pieces appearing daily. Sarah captured murals that celebrated London's multicultural spirit, where artists from around the world had left their mark on the city's walls. The colors and styles mixed together like a visual symphony of human creativity. Walking home through the quiet streets, Sarah reviewed the day's photographs on her camera. Each image told a story of London's incredible diversity and the way different communities had woven together to create something beautiful and unique. She knew the Queen and Duchess would be amazed by this tapestry of life that made London truly magnificent. Wednesday brought unexpected rain to London, but Sarah had learned long ago that the city revealed different kinds of beauty in wet weather. She started her day in Covent Garden's Covered Market, where the glass roof created a natural umbrella over the bustling activity below. The sound of raindrops on glass mixed with street musicians and the chatter of vendors setting up their stalls. Inside the market, Sarah met Roberto Martinez, a puppet maker whose tiny workshop occupied a corner stall. His wooden marionettes hung from the ceiling like a miniature theater company waiting for their cue. Roberto's hands worked with incredible precision, carving expressions into faces no bigger than walnuts. Each puppet has its own personality, Roberto explained, demonstrating how a wooden ballerina could spin and leap with just the right touch of the strings. Children see magic in them, but adults see memories of their own childhood dreams. Sarah photographed him working while curious onlookers gathered around, young and old alike mesmerized by the dancing wooden figures. The rain intensified as Sarah made her way to the British Museum, but she avoided the famous exhibitions and instead explored the quiet courtyard spaces where visitors often overlooked hidden treasures. In the Great Court, she found an elderly gentleman named Professor David Chin sketching architectural details in a worn notebook. He had been coming here every week for 15 years, documenting the way light played through the glass ceiling. Most people rush past to see the Egyptian mummies, Professor Chin said, showing Sarah his detailed drawings. But this space itself is a work of art. Watch how the shadows move across these columns as the day progresses. Sarah spent an hour photographing the interplay of light and shadow, capturing moments when raindrops on the glass ceiling created moving patterns on the stone floor below. Through the museum's corridors, Sarah discovered the conservation workshop where skilled craftspeople worked to preserve London's cultural treasures. Dr. Emily Thornton, a textile conservator, was carefully cleaning a 300-year-old tapestry, using brushes so fine they contained only a few hairs each. "We're not just preserving objects," Dr. Thornton explained as she worked under powerful magnifying lenses. "We're preserving stories, memories, connections to people who lived centuries ago." Sarah photographed the concentration on her face, the way her hands moved with surgical precision, treating each thread as if it held the secrets of history itself. The afternoon took Sarah to Chelsea's King's Road, where the rain had transformed the tree-lined street into an impressionist painting. Water dripped from ancient plane trees, creating natural curtains of silver. She ducked into the Chelsea Physic Garden, London's oldest botanic garden, where even in the rain, dedicated volunteers tended to rare plant from around the world. Garden manager Margaret Foster led Sarah through greenhouses filled with tropical flowers that bloomed in brilliant colors despite the gray London sky. Plants don't stop growing because of a little rain, Margaret laughed, adjusting the humidity controls in the orchid house. In fact, many of our most beautiful flowers need both sunshine and rain to thrive, just like London itself. Sarah photographed rare orchids whose petals seemed to glow with their own inner light, and ancient trees whose roots had been growing in London soil for over 300 years. In the herb garden, she captured raindrops balanced perfectly on lavender stems, each drop acting like a tiny magnifying glass that intensified the purple color of the flowers. The rain stopped as Sarah reached the South Kensington Museum's district, where families with children were emerging from the Natural History Museum. She followed a group to Hyde Park's Diana Memorial Playground, where the playground equipment designed like a pirate ship attracted children like a magnet. Parents sat on benches, watching their children climb and explore, their earlier worries about the rain forgotten in the joy of seeing their kids play. Sarah photographed a little boy helping his younger sister across a wooden bridge, their concentration serious as they navigated the adventure playground together. She captured grandparents pushing grandchildren on swings, the generations connected by laughter and the simple pleasure of time spent together. In Hyde Park's Rose Garden, the rain had intensified the fragrance of hundreds of rose varieties. Sarah met Jonathan Wells, the head gardener, who was deadheading spent blooms with the care of a surgeon. Despite his muddy boots and rain-soaked jacket, his enthusiasm for his work was infectious. "People think gardens are about pretty flowers," Jonathan said, showing Sarah how to identify different rose varieties by their leaves and thorns. But gardens are really about hope, about planting today what will be beautiful tomorrow. He led her to a memorial rose garden where each variety had been planted to honor someone's memory, creating a living tribute to love and remembrance. As evening approached, Sarah found herself in Hampstead Village, where the narrow streets and Georgian houses created an atmosphere of timeless charm. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from window boxes filled with trailing ivy and bright flowers. Gas lamps began to flicker on, casting warm pools of light on the wet cobblestones. She discovered a small independent bookshop where the owner, Mrs. Catherine Mills, was arranging a display of poetry books in the window. Inside, customers browsed quietly, the smell of old books and fresh coffee creating an atmosphere of peaceful contemplation. Mrs. Mills had inherited the shop from her father and maintained its character as a place where book lovers could discover literary treasures. "Books are like friends," Mrs. Mills told Sarah, handling each volume with obvious affection. "The best ones stay with you forever, and you can visit them whenever you need comfort or adventure." Sarah photographed the cozy reading nooks where customers could curl up with their purchases, and the way afternoon light filtered through the shop's old windows, creating perfect reading spots. Walking home through London's rain-washed streets, Sarah reflected on how the weather had revealed different aspects of the city's beauty. The rain had intensified colors, created intimate spaces, and brought out the kindness of strangers who shared umbrellas and opened doors for each other. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, but tonight she fell asleep listening to rain on her window, knowing she was capturing the soul of London through her lens. Thursday morning arrived with crystal-clear skies and golden sunshine that made London sparkle like a jewel. Sarah decided to explore the city's riverside communities, starting with Rotherhithe, where ancient warehouses had been converted into modern apartments while maintaining their historic character. The morning light reflected off the Thames in dancing patterns that reminded her why artists had painted this river for centuries. She met William Davies, a former dock worker who now gave walking tours of the area to share memories of London's maritime past. At 78 years old, William moved with surprising energy as he led Sarah along cobblestone paths where ships once unloaded cargo from around the world. "This river built London," William explained, pointing to the old wharf buildings that now housed art galleries and cafes. My grandfather worked these docks when they were filled with sailing ships bringing tea from China and spices from India. Now they bring tourists and families, but the river keeps flowing, keeps connecting us to the wider world. Sarah photographed William demonstrating how dock workers used to load cargo, his weathered hands still remembering the techniques he had learned as a young man. Behind him, modern cyclists rode along the Thames path where horse-drawn carts once carried goods into the city. The contrast between past and present created powerful images that told London's story of constant change and adaptation. At Butler's Wharf, Sarah discovered a community garden built on what was once a busy loading dock. Local residents had transformed the space into a green oasis where vegetables grew in raised beds and children learned about urban farming. She met teacher Sarah Okafor, who brought her primary school class here every week to tend their small plot of land. Many of these children have never seen vegetables growing. Miss Okafor explained as her students carefully watered lettuce seedlings. They think food comes from supermarkets. Here they learn where food really comes from and how much care it takes to grow something beautiful and nourishing. Sarah photographed the concentration on the children's faces as they measured water and counted seeds, their urban classroom providing lessons no textbook could teach. The Thames path led Sarah to Bermondsey, where the morning light illuminated the old brick buildings that housed London's most creative food scene. At Borough Market, vendors were setting up stalls filled with artisanal cheeses, fresh bread, and exotic fruits. She met Giovanni Rossini, whose family had been selling Italian delicacies in London for 4 generations. "Food is love made visible," Giovanni said, slicing paper-thin prosciutto with the skill of a master craftsman. "When my great-grandfather came here from Naples, he brought our family recipes and the dream of sharing Italian flavors with London families. Now their grandchildren and great-grandchildren come to our stall, and we're all part of the same London story." Sarah photographed Giovanni's hands as he arranged antipasti platters, each ingredient placed with artistic precision. She captured the faces of customers tasting samples, their expressions changing from curiosity to delight as they experienced new flavors. The market buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages, creating a symphony of London's international character. In nearby Maltby Street Market, Sarah found emerging food entrepreneurs testing their culinary dreams. She met Amy Chun, a young chef who had left a corporate job to start her own dumpling stall. Amy's tiny kitchen space was barely larger than a closet, but her passion filled it with energy and purpose. "Everyone thought I was crazy to leave my safe office job," Amy admitted, folding dumpling wrappers with practiced efficiency. "But every morning I wake up excited to create something delicious and share it with people. That's worth more than any corporate salary." Sarah photographed Amy's concentrated expression as she shaped each dumpling by hand, and the joy on customers' faces as they tasted her creations. The afternoon took Sarah to Canary Wharf's hidden spaces, where office workers had created unexpected communities among the gleaming towers. In a small park between buildings, she discovered a lunchtime chess club where investment bankers and construction workers played friendly games on concrete tables. Marcus Thompson, a financial analyst, explained how the chess club had started during the pandemic when people were hungry for human connection. "We realized that despite our different jobs and backgrounds, we all love the challenge of a good chess game. Now we meet every day, rain or shine, and some of our best friends are people we met over a chessboard." Sarah photographed the intense concentration of players planning their next moves and the laughter when someone made a brilliant or terrible play. The contrast between the serious business world towering above them and the playful competition happening at street level perfectly captured London's ability to create community in unexpected places. At the Museum of London Docklands, Sarah met Dr. Rachel Kumar, a historian who specialized in London's immigrant communities. Dr. Kumar was preparing an exhibition about how different cultures had shaped London's identity over centuries of immigration and cultural exchange. London isn't beautiful because it's old or grand. Dr. Kumar explained, showing Sarah artifacts from communities around the world. London is beautiful because it's alive, constantly growing and changing as new people bring their traditions, foods, languages, and dreams to mix with what's already here. She showed Sarah a wedding dress that combined traditional Indian embroidery with modern London fashion, representing the creative fusion that happened when cultures met and blended. As the sun began to set, Sarah climbed to the viewing platform of One Canada Square, where the entire city spread out below her like a living map. From this height, she could see how the Thames curved through different neighborhoods, connecting ancient villages that had grown together to become the magnificent organism that was modern London. The golden hour light painted the city in warm tones that made even the most ordinary buildings look magical. Sarah photographed the way the setting sun reflected off thousands of windows, creating a light show that changed every moment as the earth slowly turned. In the distance, she could see families in Regent's Park, commuters crossing bridges, and boats moving along the river like water bugs on a pond. Her camera captured the moment when London's lights began to twinkle on, transforming the city from a daytime workplace into an evening playground. Street lamps created golden pools along the riverside paths, and the warm glow from apartment windows suggested thousands of families gathering for dinner, sharing stories of their day in the city they called home. From her high perch, Sarah understood that she wasn't just photographing buildings and landmarks. She was documenting a living, breathing community of 8 million people who had chosen to build their lives together in this remarkable place beside the Thames. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect weather for Sarah's final day of photography before presenting her collection to the Royal Planning Committee. She had saved her most special locations for last, places that captured the heart and soul of London in ways that would surprise and delight the Queen and Duchess of Cambridge. Her first stop was Leadenhall Market, where Victorian architecture created a cathedral of commerce in the heart of the financial district. The ornate roof and painted ironwork made every ordinary errand feel like a scene from a fairy tale. Sarah met Edward Phillips, whose family had operated a traditional butcher shop in the market for over a century. "My great-great-grandfather started this business when Queen Victoria was on the throne," Edward explained, arranging cuts of meat with the pride of an artist displaying paintings. "We've served everyone from dock workers to bank presidents, and we treat them all the same, with respect and the best quality we can provide." His shop was a time capsule of traditional London commerce, where personal service and quality still mattered more than speed and convenience. Sarah photographed Edward teaching his teenage grandson the proper way to select and prepare different cuts of meat, passing down skills that connected the boy to generations of family tradition. The morning light streaming through the market's glass ceiling created dramatic shadows that highlighted the craftsmanship in every detail of the Victorian metalwork. At nearby Guildhall Art Gallery, Sarah discovered a hidden Roman amphitheater beneath the modern building. Dr. Patricia Williams, the site archaeologist, led her through the ancient ruins where gladiators once fought for the entertainment of Roman London. "People walk over this history every day without knowing it's here," Dr. Williams explained, running her fingers along stone walls that were nearly 2,000 years old. "London is built in layers, with each generation building on top of what came before, but never completely erasing the past." Sarah photographed the way modern lighting illuminated ancient stones, showing how London's history was literally the foundation for its present. The gallery above showcased paintings of London through the centuries, including works by artists who had captured the city's beauty in times of war and peace, prosperity, and hardship. Sarah met amateur artist George Mitchell, no relation despite the shared surname, who came to the gallery every week to copy the techniques of the masters. "I started painting when I retired," George explained, carefully mixing colors on his palette to match a Turner landscape. "These artists saw beauty in London that I walk past every day without noticing. Trying to paint like them teaches me to really see my own city." Sarah captured his concentration as he worked, and the way other visitors gathered to watch him transform blank canvas into glowing images of London's riverside. Her afternoon journey took her to Blackfriars Bridge, where she met James Harrington, a Thames mudlarker who had legal permission to search the riverbank for historical artifacts. As the tide went out, James guided Sarah along the muddy shore where centuries of London life lay buried in the Thames silt. Every tide reveals new treasures, James explained, showing Sarah fragments of medieval pottery, Victorian clay pipes, and Roman coins that emerged from the mud like gifts from the past. The Thames has been London's highway, its sewer, its playground, and its guardian for 2,000 years. Everything that's ever happened in this city eventually finds its way into the river. Sarah photographed James carefully examining a piece of Tudor-era pottery with a magnifying glass, treating each fragment like a precious archaeological find. Behind him, the modern city continued its busy pace, but here on the riverbank, time moved differently, connecting the present moment to centuries of human stories. At St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Sarah met Sister Margaret O'Connor, a nun who had worked as a nurse in London for 40 years. The hospital's ancient buildings housed some of the world's most advanced medical equipment, creating a fascinating blend of historical architecture and cutting-edge healthcare. Healing happens in many ways, Sister Margaret explained as she tended to the hospital's memorial garden, where families could find quiet moments during difficult times. Sometimes it's medicine and technology, but sometimes it's just having a peaceful place to sit and remember that there's still beauty in the world. Sarah photographed the garden where roses grew beside benches inscribed with messages of love and remembrance. The golden hour led Sarah to her final location, the roof garden atop a modern office building in the city, where she had special permission to photograph the panoramic view. As the sun began to set, London transformed into a magnificent light show spread out below her like a living constellation. From this elevated perspective, Sarah could see how the ancient Roman road system still shaped the pattern of modern streets, how medieval churches created islands of green space among towering office blocks, and how the Thames curved through the city like a silver ribbon connecting past and future. She photographed families of peregrine falcons that nested on the building's ledges, the fastest birds in the world choosing to make their home among London's skyscrapers. The falcons represented perfectly how London adapted and evolved, finding ways for wild nature and urban civilization to coexist and even thrive together. As darkness fell and the city lights began to sparkle, Sarah reviewed the week's collection on her camera. She had captured not just beautiful images, but the living story of a city that was both ancient and modern, traditional and innovative, global and deeply local. Each photograph showed a different facet of London's character, from the grand monuments that tourists expected to the hidden corners where real life happened every day. The next morning, Sarah would present these images to the Royal Planning Committee, confident that she had revealed London's true beauty. Not just its famous landmarks, but its heart and soul embodied in the millions of people who chose to call this magnificent city home. The Queen and Duchess of Cambridge would see through her lens how London's greatest treasure was not its buildings or monuments, but its people and the communities they had created together over centuries of shared history. Her work was complete, and London had never looked more beautiful.